Right. So as we discussed, the service is the incoming, reference is the outgoing. So if the components want to talk to the outside world, the component has to go through the reference. There is no other way. Okay? And in similar fashion, if the outside world want to talk to a component, they have to come through the service. Both are WSDLs, but by the time of service you may use, you may hand code or you may create an abstract WSDL, and once you deploy, the server will give you the concrete WSDL. But by the time of reference, you need a concrete WSDL because you need to invoke that one, right? So that is the difference here. And for that, basically with this architecture, we have some set of files, in the composite architecture. So the one important file is composite.xml. Okay.
In 10G also this is same?
No.
Then both sides are service?
No, both are beeple. In 10G it is only the beeple, and you have partner links. And you have the partner link. The partner link can play a service role or the reference role. I will tell you the beeple component. Okay. This is the composite architecture. Okay. And now in the composite, so basically what you have is you have the root element as composite. So it has a namespace. Actually, you can get that namespace. Alright. So the composite has what? A service, reference, and a component. Right. Service, reference, some name mistake over there. Component. Next you have wire. Set of wires or wiring. I need to remember actually. So let me open this GDL. Alright, set of wires, I think, set of wires inside that wire, I believe there is a name to for that. So your composite looks like this. Okay, a composite has a service. Okay, inside the service we will mention what is the WSDL file name that you are using to create this particular service. Okay, and what is the binding that you are actually using. Alright, service is what? Is it an incoming or outgoing? Service as an incoming, and inside the service we will mention the WSDL file, and we will also mention that what kind of binding that you want to bind for this particular service. Right? By default, it will be a SOAP binding. By default, it will be a SOAP binding. That means a web service binding. Okay, you will have binding dot ws. So there will be one more line which will tell you the WSDL file. So there will be some stuff here. Okay, and the most important thing is you need to import. Okay, so basically what all the WSDL files or the XSD files or anything that you want to use inside composite, that means inside any component, that has to be either directly or indirectly imported into your composite. Okay, so what does that mean? Let us say that you have created a service, okay, and that service actually uses a WSDL file, right? So even though inside the service you will mention that this is the WSDL file for the service, that service WSDL file has to be imported into your composite. Okay, not just the WSDL file, any XSD also, either directly or indirectly it has to be imported. Directly means you can directly import the namespace and the type of the import file, WSDL or XSD, and the location. So there are three parameters, and the type you can give it as a WSDL or XSD. Okay, and after that location you can give where it is relative path you have to give, and the namespace you know the namespace. Okay, so you can mention if it is a if it is a WSDL, you will say that the namespace of the WSDL, the type is WSDL, location is the WSDL file name, right? And inside the WSDL what we have another import to import the XSD file. So that is indirect import, right? So let us say you have created another XSD file, and you want to create an element, you want to create a variable for your inside your people process, and you want to use it for some operations. Okay, so even though your people compile time, even the design time, it may not compile you anything, but it will not be compiled. Why? Because whatever the WSDL files or XSD files, the namespaces that you want to use, that has to be imported. Right? So then what does it mean? Either you have to import that XSD file in any of the WSDL which is already imported in your composite, or go to the composite and import the XSD. Right? You get it or not? So let us say you have an XSD file. Right? You have created some XSD file with some element. Right? In your BPL process you want to use it. Right? And the criteria here is either the XSD file directly or indirectly, it has to be imported into your composite. So what do you mean by the direct import? So direct import is you have to go to the composite.xml and import, like you have to use the import tag, which is a sequence wise you have to use. The first is the import element, and import what it is, namespace, type is XML, location is the file name. So generally XSD file will put in the folder structure called XSD, and you have to put XSD/file name, relative path you have to give. And the indirect import is you have imported the WSDL file, and inside the WSDL file you can import the XSD file, right? That is indirect WSDL. That means if you create one more XSD file which may not be related to any WSDL file, that means inside the WSDL you may have not used it as a message type or whatever it is, but some reason you want to create an XSD file. That means even though you are not using that WSDL XSD file, you have to go and import it in the WSDL. Okay, if you want to use it. Otherwise, if you don't want to do it in the WSDL file, what you can do? You can come to the composite and you can import it. So in 10G architecture, people who are doing it in the WSDL file, but in the 11G architecture, the good practice is to import it in the composite.xml. Okay, so no matter in the design time it may not show you any error, but the compile time it will show you the error if the XSD is not being imported. Okay, and it will not give you the direct information. Just give me a moment. Alright, so basically any XSD file has to be imported here either directly or indirectly, otherwise you cannot use it. Okay. And next thing is, we'll create a service, and here we'll give the WSDL name. There is an element, so I didn't remember that. So here interface.WSDL, okay, and it will give you the WSDL file name with the namespace. Okay, this is the process, and this is the WSDL interface. Okay, and the name of the WSDL people process 1, and don't go by this. This is the kind of language they are using. Okay, and don't go by the callback interface also. Let me create a new. I'm just creating a new project to show you. See that it has a WSDL, it has a service. You go here, composite, The name of the composite, hello world. The version here is we are using it as version 1.0, and actually to deploy it is not the driving parameter. There is something different, so don't go by that. Excuse me. Sorry. So the version, the revision here it is, I mean it's just showing the what is the composite revision, but to deploy this thing there is a different thing, we have to use. And by default, when you deploy this composite it will be active. I mean there are other driving parameters. So here you need to put the namespace prefixes, and see it is having the default namespace. We have to remove this. Okay, unfortunately most of the engines generate the default namespace prefix, and which is, if it generates and if any XML is coming with the default namespace, it will put XML ns is equal to quotation null namespace. So then it will be very hard to interpret. Alright. So, and now see here, it has imported the WSDL file with this particular namespace, and the location is here, and the import type is WSDL. And in a similar fashion you can import the XSD also. And now here he defines the service and the service name here. This will be the same service name as you can see it in the concrete WSDL. And whatever the name that you give it here, and it will be displayed in the concrete WSDL service name. And this is just for the user interface to display it, and nothing to do with the deployment time or the runtime. In fact, you can remove this for the deployment time, right? And next thing is the interface WSDL, and this service uses the WSDL with this particular namespace. Okay, and with this particular namespace, what was the WSDL it has imported? This, and automatically this WSDL, right? See, it is using the namespace. It is using the namespace, right? And also it uses something called port type. What is the port type here? Hello world. So interface means it is the port type. Okay, so that means whatever the operations that you have in here, this composite, this service is going to implement those operations, right? And what it is saying, if you want to implement another set of operations, if you have another port, you have to change it here. Interface means the port type. So what it's saying, interface.WSDL, interface is equal to, inside this WSDL, this is the interface. Okay, and that is what is going to bind. And the binding is what? And after binding, what is the port name you are getting? It's not the port type. It is the port inside the service. The port name will be this, and the service name will be this. And it is the way that you are defining the endpoint location. You are defining the endpoint location for the port listing. And this port will come with the binding. Binding will come with the interface. Interface means the port type. Okay, so that is the reason we generally give the interface postfix as I, student I, right? We have given the port type as student I. Okay, student interface, right? So if you use that one, and student I will come, right? And this is the service. If you have any reference would have come over here. Don't worry on that. And next thing what you have is the component. Okay, now the component what you have is the BPEL process. What was the name of the component? It is the hello world. And what was the implementation? Implementation is BPEL, and the implementation mediator is also there. Implementation, this one, what is that? Business rule is also there. There are so many things. It is like technology. And what was the source file for that BPEL? Hello world. Okay, for each component, say like each component may have its own properties and kind of stuff. So that is the reason those properties can be given here after this thing, you can say property. Okay, or there is another way of doing it is, for every component that you create, a dot component file will be created with the component name, right? So now what file you expect? Hello world dot component file. So in that component again the structure is same, but you have the component. You have only the component. So that means if you open this hello world dot component type file, what you have? You have the same service, isn't it? I mean service and everything it is showing, right? So what you can do, if you want to add some properties, you can actually do enter here, you can add it here. Okay?
Properties.
Yeah, if you want to add properties, you can do it here. When you do it here, these properties are available for only that particular component. And the same way you can do it here also. Inside the component also you can do. Okay, there are so many two ways of doing it. Even if you do it here also, the properties are actually available for only this component. But there are two ways of doing it. You can do it here or you can do it here. Now here also the service it is showing. Why it is showing the service? You have wired it. When you have wired it, your people component is going to use it. So it also requires some information. So that is the reason again the services. And this service only specific to this particular component, right? And if this component has another references, and the reference will come over here. Okay. Inside the composite, you may have 10 references, but inside the component you may have 1 or 2, which are specific to that particular component. So the file will be component name dot component type. Okay. And now if you change the service name, so let us say you change the service name here, and you have to go and change in the here location and everywhere you have to change. Okay. And inside the component the service name is hello world client, but outside what it was? Hello world client EP. There is a change. Okay. And inside the component, is this service can be exposed? No, the service is not exposed. That means you will never be able to see a binding for this, isn't it? That is the reason. Do you see a binding here? No, because whatever the services or the references inside the component are never been exposed. If it is not been exposed, why you need a binding for that? Isn't it? So what was the ground rule? Ground rule is the user will talk to the component talks to the people process or component, right? Of course inside the component you have a service, so that is a different matter, but does it requires that component is directly exposed? No, only this service is exposed, right? So that is the reason if you see the composite, a service has a binding, right? Wherever you open the same component type, you have the similar service, but you don't have the binding. Okay, why do you need a binding? You don't need a binding for the service, but for the reference we need a binding, isn't it? But for the reference we need a binding because it has to know that, right? So now if anything messed up with the XSD files or WSDL file, what all you need to check? What all you need to check? So if the WSDL file name is anything messed up, you need to check the file name here in the import first, okay, and then the service inside the composite and see the wire where it is wired. Okay, and now see here the wire means the external service is being wired to the internal service. So what was the internal service name? Hello world client, isn't it? So the external service name is what? Hello world client underscore EP. And whoever the request, if it is the landing at the external service here, where it will go? It will go to the hello world component. Inside that there is another component, the service, that is hello world service. So this is what the wiring.
Means whenever we create a service, we create two services.
Right. It creates one service external, one service internal. Right? This is an internal service. It is as good as a partner link. It is a partner link in your Beeple. Okay, so don't go up to Beeple for now. Just do it here.
Can you repeat wire again?
Yeah. So basically, go to the design and assume that I remove the wiring here, and I have another Beeple process, some more Beeple processes, and the request is landing here. Okay, and user have to make sure whether request is going to this Beeple process or the other Beeple process, right? So that means if there is no wiring, so you just have the component service and the component, right? So you don't have the wire here. That means the request is landed here and it will not be delivered to a component. Okay, it is because assume that a situation where you have multiple services and multiple components, right? And there the ambiguity generates, right? If the request is landing at one service, where it has to be delegated, where it has to be transferred, not delegated, where it has to be transferred. There are two more components, and it is under the confusion to which component it has to forward. So for that, what we have to give? We have to give the wire. So we can do it from this. What is that? Wire. What is the source URI? What is the? It is not the URI. What is that component, or what was that? Someone in this? No, it is the name, right? Oh, source dot URI. And what was the name? Is a target URI or target? What was that? And what is the component name here? And if you see the design, automatically wiring will be there, right? So from the UI, you can just do a drag and drag. Automatically it creates the same thing, right? So, and better try to use, try to hand code, then you will understand everything. Okay, and now we'll create a small XSL WSDL and see how it is going to do. Okay. Composite itself, it may have some properties, and component may have some properties, and if there are, if you want to make it specific to the component, inside the composite, inside the component you can do it. Otherwise, you can go to the component.type and you can do it. There is no difference actually in that. Both are pertaining to the same component. But if you want to, give some properties which are specific to composite, not the component, then you have to do it in the composite. After the service, there is a schema, and you can download the schema for this. So you can Google, there is an XSD file for this. So you can just Google for the XSD file and see the sequence and where property goes here. But it's not connected. Connected or not? Connected. But why it is not coming? Why was it not coming? there should be a space schema location, right? Logic.scar.xsd, what it is? This is the XSD, right? And this XSD you can follow what you have and complex type. What was that? You have the element reference and inside this is the element service, right? Yeah, things like this. I mean, you follow this XSD file, then you will be able to know what it is, right? Is the same namespace what we have tried? Oracle dot car dot 1.0. No, it is not showing this. This is not that one, right? They're showing the different one. Okay, so you can try, different thing. I mean, try to get that XSD, then you follow where we have to give the property names, okay, and the property element is especially like if I need a property to be given, here I give the property some JCA PPL transaction something. And that means the whole people will be transactional, all people components. So I give the sub properties here. I mean I know the sequence. I have to give it after the service and the reference before component. If it is within the component, I copy paste here within the before. Okay. So you need to know the sequence of that. I mean, sequentially where it is possible. So you can just go through the XSD file for this, then you will understand how sequentially it is defined and where to do it. We can do that. Okay, right. So I mean, this is what the actually strategy is. So you need to have an import, okay, check the import, check the service, and then component, and then wire, okay, and you should have the component type also, and the same thing here, the component type, and it has a 1.1, and this is the composite root element into the same scar, and here the root element is composite type. Both will share the same XSD, okay, with the namespace this thing, and inside the service, and you may have all the similar thing, but this is a different thing, okay. And here you may not have the binding. Basically we may not use the binding here, so we may not use the binding. We have it, but this service you don't need to bind it. So if you do the binding, it will be exposed to the outside world. There are so many varieties of binding that you want to understand. Not here. I will do it at this level. And this is what a web service binding, right? And there are so many bindings. I can give it as binding dot direct means that is the T3 protocol. Binding dot B2B ADF means it will be an ADF business component. So you can use it from the ADF view component to a business component, right? And that means any Java program, they can use it as a ADF binding. I mean, if you want to invoke Beeple program from a Java program, then you can use B2B binding, or you can use basic binding, anything. But generally, if you do B2B binding, and you can directly invoke it from the a B2B user interface, I mean B2B view component, not the B2B business component, right? And in the same way, a B2B, there is a B2B server. B2B has its own, legacy e-commerce protocol, and it uses, EDI document instead of XSD. It uses the EDI kind of document, so you can do that one. And direct binding, and then EJB. Your BPEL process will become a stateless EJB. If you have, the correlation kind of stuff, then it will be a stateful. Otherwise, it is a stateless EJB. And JCA, you will be seeing the JCA binding, as a reference. Okay, and JCA is a Java Connectivity Architecture Framework. It is still a VSIP binding. It is still a VSIP Java binding, but it uses some, framework for the adapter framework. That is the only difference here. And web service means, WS means it is a simple SOAP binding, SOAP web service binding, and VSIP means it is a plain Java binding. Okay, it doesn't follow the JCA architecture framework, but it's a Java binding. That means, internally a Java class will be there, and a Java class, it will be, you will be getting a Java class name, and it will be compiled as a Java class, and you have to invoke it as a Java class name there, right? That is a Java binding. That's a VSIP Java binding. But generally, people use a WS for external. For internal use, we use binding dot direct. Okay, if it is internal means between the components from, BPM to BPEL, composite, mediator to BPEL, or that kind of stuff, we will use direct binding. So when it is a direct binding, what it is? Within the clustered environment, it uses the T3 protocol. If it is local, it uses the local Java kind of stuff. Okay, so that is the main thing. Excuse me. But if you want to use your entire BPEL process as a ADF BC, then you have to use binding.adf. So from ADF binding, from ADF view component, you can use it as a BC component. There will be a registry component name, and they can get the component name, they can use it. Okay. So that is what the binding here, and next the component, and next the vary. Right? Are you clear with this? Okay. And this is actually, a logical, SCA architecture. It's not, the SOA thing. It's a SCA architecture. Again, in the basically the server side, how it is designed is, as we discussed yesterday, what we have is, we have dehydration store, and we have MDS metadata store. Okay, dehydration store is used for storing the instances and kind of stuff, and metadata store is actually, storing the all deployments, not just this thing, Dartmouth or something like that. Even if you deploy ADF, everything will be stored in the MDS, because in the clustered environment, you have different cluster nodes, and each cluster node will refer to the MDS, and it will get the deployed ER file or WAR file, and it will do it. And for us to, in a BPEL, in a composite, what purpose we use? We use it to deploy, common XSD files, common WSDL files. Okay, and how we have to do is, we have to jar all of them, and we have to deploy it as the MDS. We have to deploy it as an application. That's it. And after that, inside the jar, you might have some folder structure, right? And that folder structure has to be given with Aura MDS : / and whatever the folder structure you have. Then automatically that file will come over here.
But while installation of SOA, we configure database.
Yes, we will configure the MDS also. Yes.
And is the physical memory?
Yes, MDS is a schema. And whatever the jar files you deploy, it is going to be stored in a database at server. In JDeveloper, it is a file system. Okay? In JDeveloper, it is a file system. Alright? Okay? So these are the two main schemas, and we also have something called SOAIntro2. Okay, and basically it stores, the configuration of your entire SOA engine. So your SOA engine comes with various components, right? So it has a BPEL, it has a a mediator, and it has all the other stuff. And you may have configuration parameters for all these components, right? And the configuration for the engine level, configuration for the each car engine level, that will be stored in the SOAIntro. Okay, I mean, in fact, whatever, I mean, if you say the audit logging level and all that information will be stored in the SOAIntro. Okay, and earlier, like so I mean, the OSB 10G, you were not required to have the SOAIntro, but from OSB 11G, it has become the component of SOA. Then you have to create a SOAIntro schema, and then only you will be able to get it. Okay, and basically it holds the configuration of your engines, various engines. Okay, so engines, I mean people engine and everything, that will be stored here. Okay, all right. So these are the three major schemas that we can use, that we use it in the I mean the engine, SCA engine uses inside. This is the Oracle SCA implementation. Okay, all right. And logically how you have is WebLogic has the domains, right? I mean, the domain architecture, right? WebLogic has a domain architecture, but inside that you have SOAIntro. It is one engine. SOAIntro is one engine inside the WebLogic, and inside this all composites will be stored. Okay, all composite will be destroyed. Composite 1, composite 2, composite 3, and this will be there in the domain. This is a WebLogic domain. Inside the WebLogic domain, what you have? One engine, SOAIntro engine. Inside the SOAIntro engine, we have the configuration for all composite applications. Okay, and we have for one WebLogic server, we have one SOA engine. In a domain, you may have many engines per cluster node, right? So SOAIntro 1, SOAIntro 2, and SOAIntro running on cluster node 1, SOAIntro running on cluster node 2. Basically, SOAIntro is a database schema. It holds all the deployed composites and components inside the composite, everything will be stored in a database schema called SOAIntro, and that SOAIntro is shared by all your cluster nodes, right? So it's a hub and spoke architecture, right? You deploy your application in the SOAIntro, automatically all cluster nodes, when the cluster node starts, it will go to the SOAIntro, get the composite. It will go to the SOAIntro and it will get the composite. So inside your domain, if you have two cluster nodes, how many SOAIntro engines will be there? Two engines. SOAIntro running on node 1, and you may have, if this is a clustered environment, you may see the same composites running on node 2, and there might be a load balancing URL. You don't care. Okay. So this is assume that inside a WebLogic domain you have two nodes, node 1 and node 2. So when it is clustered domain, and what happens if you deploy it on one node, automatically it will be deployed in all the nodes. So that there, if you have SOAIntro, it is one database schema, and you will find the same SOAIntro running on all the nodes. And that means if you have composite 1 here, the composite 1 here and here, you will have both this thing, and there will be a load balancer, and it will distribute to either node 1 or the node 2. That is a typical cluster node information. So this is how the logical infrastructure. This yeah.
How we can create that node 1?
I mean, by the time of configuring the domain, WebLogic domain, we have to do that. Okay, and this statement holds true till 11.1.1.2. From 11.1.1.3, you have something called partitions. Partition 1. Okay, and partition 1 has the composite 1 and composite 2, and you have TITI1 or TITI1, right? Okay, and inside the compo you may have composite with 4. Okay, and you will have the same information on another cluster because it is a clustered environment.
So what is the benefit of creating multiple partitions in one?
Right, I'm going to do this. So basically, assume that you have various composites, which are required for one integration, right? Assume that PO interface, purchase order interface, and that interface requires 2-3 composites to interface from one source to another machine. So you can create a partition there, and you can deploy all of them, right? And your configuration drives from composite to partition to the SOAIntro2 domain, right? And let us say you are playing with this thing, you can create a partition here, and you can deploy by the time of design time or something, and you can test it, and then you can deploy it to the main part. You can define the partitions at your convenience. Okay, so generally people will define the partitions based on configuration. So based on the memory, based on number of threads you want to allocate, based on number of EJBs that you want to allocate. So they create partitions, and they say connection timeout settings and all those things, right? So let us say if some composites are taking a longer kind of timeouts, so they create one partition. For that they assign a longer connection timeout, and the rest of the partitions will fall in the normal connection timeout. Okay, so for those kind of configuration changes, it's again you can create this thing. Okay, and this partition is same as 10G domain. In 10G, what you can do is you can create domains. In 10G, you can create domains. In 11G, it is partition. In 11G, domain means what it is? It's a whole WebLogic domain. It's not kind of different thing. So to match that one from 11.1.1.3, what you have? Partitions. Okay, and you can deploy it on the partitions. Okay, I have to check 11.1.1.4. It has released in last week only. Last week last Monday it has released. So I have to check that one. Once I have the latest information, I can share it with you. See what we see. Business? Oh, I don't know. I think it might fall in the same architecture. It might fall in the same architecture. Okay. So this is the SOAIntro. Okay. And apart from that, you have several other things. This is related to only the SOAIntro. Apart from this, WebLogic, you have so many things. Okay. And I will tell you what I understand. I will tell you various consoles now. This is the logical architecture, how the composite is deployed. Now we'll discuss about various consoles. We have logic console, console. Okay. This is generally for WebLogic, the URL console is host port, and port number by default it is 7001, but you can change it, and /console. It will drive you to the WebLogic console. It is not the SOA console. It is the WebLogic console, and this console is an administration console of your WebLogic. What it is? It is an admin console of WebLogic. We'll say admin console, and this console is not used for for the SOA developers, and it is used for WebLogic administrator. For the SOA admin console, and you have something called Enterprise Manager Console, and this is http://hostmain and port. By default it is 7001 only. Okay, /em. Okay, all right. And if you say this, it will be the SOA admin console. So from with this, you will be able to see the architecture that we have discussed here. Okay, and you can see what composites you have. Okay, and like we did it yesterday, like we have tested and all that stuff, right? From the EM console, we can deploy, we can undeploy, we can test, we can stop composites, and you can work with composites, and you can see the instances of the composite, and you can do everything from the EM console. Okay, we will mostly use the EM console, right? And the EM console is deployed on the admin server. Generally, the admin server port is running on 7001. Okay, and this is just the console. Okay, and the actual components are deployed on host of SOA server. By default it is 2001, right? And then it follows. See, yesterday we have seen the SOAP UI. Did we save that one? I think we have not saved it, right? This we have not saved. Alright, I'll open any of this thing. And if you see this, and this is going on 8001 port, it is not the 7001. I'm just trying to copy paste so that it will show in the board. So what it is showing? 8001 port. Okay, the admin console is showing on 7001, but the composite is running on 8001 port. Okay, and after that SOAIntro. Okay, and then services, and then references. You have all that stuff here. Okay, and this is the default partition and default config, default map, and then the partner link, and you have so many, the composite name and the service name. There is the URL for that. Okay, and basically the composites are running on 8001 port, but this can be administrated on 7001. Okay, so to understand the difference here, we need to understand the WebLogic architecture. Generally, the WebLogic has the admin server and the managed server. Okay. Generally, Logic is coming up with a different architecture: admin server and the managed server. Both are JDB servers only. Okay. Inside a domain, you may have one admin server, and you may have many managed servers. Okay, and each managed server doing a particular job. And for SOA, SCA, you might have one managed server, and for BAM you might have one managed server, and for BPMN you might have one managed server. All are storing, all are configurable by the admin server. So the admin server just holds the configuration, and it will not run the application. The applications are run by your managed servers, and it just holds the configuration. That's the WebLogic architecture. And WebLogic 11.1.1 till 11.1.1.2, the kind of deployment, the default deployment is one admin server, and after that one managed server for SCA, one managed server for your BPM, and one managed server for the other application, worklist application, different things. Okay, so basically you have to start one admin server, you have to start SOA server, and you have to start BAM server. Okay, and if you have OSB, you have to start OSB server also. Okay, and so SOA is one managed server, BAM is another managed server, OSB is another managed server. Generally 3 managed servers it will come with, but it is all up to the deployment. And the latest, you have the another model of deployment is everything you deploy it on admin server. Okay, SOA server, BAM server, your OSB server, everything will be deployed on the admin server. So in WebLogic architecture, admin server is must, and after that you may or may not have the managed servers. And basically all servers are JDE server. You can deploy the application on any server. Generally, in production, people will do it in a different way. People will have one admin server, and for each variety of components, they will use a separate managed server. Okay, but for development, they use one admin server for everything. Okay. So that's the WebLogic architecture, and these are the various URLs, the application URLs kind of stuff.
Configuration of
it's at the same port. 7001 port. Yeah, now 11.1.12 it is 8011. 11.1.13 if you deploy it on the same domain, it will be 700.
On your admin server only configured this.
Yeah, even here at least in this even 11.1.12 also we have configured in such a way that we have two 11.1.12 servers here. One is running on the Windows box, one is running on the Linux box. And Linux box is opened on a public internet, so you can even access it from home also. And Windows box, it is this for this server it is deployed here. And the Windows box is everything merged into admin server, even though it is 11.1.12. So we have changed the default deployment, and we have deployed everything on the 11.1.12 and the admin server. And the Linux box we have deployed it on the admin server, managed servers, and some kind of stuff. Okay, basically the thought process here is, your JDeveloper basically it will take the server connection of admin server. Okay, and then when you try to deploy, the admin server will return you the URLs of the managed server, and then the managed server will be deployed. Okay, so basically the problem we have, it was over the internet, and the admin server will return the IP address as a local IP address, it's not the public IP address. Then the deployment from the JDeveloper which fails. Okay, so if you use the same admin server, okay, itself it is the admin server, itself it is the managed server. So if it returns the same server name, the IP address, and it resolves to the same IP address, and it will be smoother deployment. It should be a smoother deployment. Okay, so that is the reason we thought of deploying in a single domain model. Okay, that's a deployment actually challenge. We can manage it with the manual deployment. So there are several ways I can show you. You can take WLST connection and you can deploy things, and there are several ways you can deploy it. Okay. Okay. So this is the logical architecture. Okay.
When we compare anything as a developer and we deploy it, which server it is? Is it initially?
Okay, you will be deploying it through the admin server. If you deploy it on the admin server will push it to managed server.
Okay, the soap which is on the soap where we are testing is on.
Yes, on the managed server, right? You will be deploying it through admin server. It is admin server's responsibility to push it to all managed servers. If it is a clustered environment, you might have more than one managed server. So it's admin server's responsibility to push it to all managed servers, right?
Managed servers are 3.
Yeah. Okay. So And see in the composite it has, there is a composite, kind of stuff, and try to understand the composite, and you should be capable to hand code the composite.xml, dot component type, WSDL, and XSD, and beacon also. You should be able to hand code all these files. So then only you will be able to go and resolve the issues. Those are messed by your JDeveloper. Okay, and basically JDeveloper, in some cases, it will mess up all your services, your references and everything. Okay, and every time it is not possible to create another composite or do it from the scratch. Okay, you have to open the source code mode and you have to clean the mess. Okay, let us say go back to this thing. It has a callback in previous exercise. I open it. See, it has a reply, but it is showing the callback. Where do we have a callback port?
Inside the service.
Yeah, this is the service, and you have the callback interface. This is not actually required. Okay, you have to remember it's a reply, it's not a callback, and there are two imports. Okay, one import would be fine. So you have to remove the student import. Okay, and you have to remove the callback here, and you have to see the names properly if it is clean or not. Okay, and this cleanup has to be done, to your composite.xsd, your component type, your WSDL file, your XSD file, and your beacon file. Okay, totally how many files you have to check? First XSD. First you have to create the XSD, then WSDL, then the composite, then the component, then the beacon. Okay, all are XML. So you should be able to understand all these files. Then only you are able to see what's happening. Okay. See, basically the problem is it uses the default namespace. In some cases you cannot use it. If you go and hard code, the namespace prefix, that is actually a very good practice. And the problem is, if you change anything by the UI, again it will change into the default namespace. Okay, you need to be very careful. This is the bug in, your JDeveloper. This is the problem with the IDE that you are using. That's the reason I do not prefer using IDE itself. I am happy to hand code everything. Okay. So basically, as a beginner, it may not be advised to use the hand code technology, but you have to learn how if anything happens, and you have to learn, you have to know where I can go and tweak it, right? So that's the reason I'm saying. Any questions in this moment? Any questions?
Can you open the composite? Can you open the composite?
Yeah, we'll create the composite.
Can you open it? In service, can you define more than one interface?
In service?
Can you define more than one interface?
Yes, you can. But if it is more than one interface, what is a port you are binding? You will be having multiple ports, right? See, remember, go back to our previous class. What we discussed was, whenever you have more than one operation taking the same input type, what we have discussed? Either RPC style. If you still want to go through the document style, what we can do? We can create multiple port types, and each port type will have the different WS binding, right? And will have a different port, and each port has a different URL, right? That means, see, basically you may have multiple interfaces. You may have multiple interfaces, but each interface has to have a different binding. You got it? Each interface has a different binding. See here, the interface, it is port type. Even the WSDL structure is also the same thing, right? For port type we have the binding. Okay, and here you may have multiple interfaces, and one interface is the main interface, the other interface is the callback interface that user is calling back. Okay, and if you have multiple interfaces, you can still do interface and you can bind it, but it is very hard time for the people process to identify which interface it is. So that is the reason you still have only one interface per service, and if you want to do the same thing, you can create one more service. You can create one more service and you can create one more interface for that, and you can bind it, right? But here you have to, this is going by the interface. I mean, it is going by per interface basis. It is not going by the per people or something like that. Okay, so that is the reason in service you will be able to see only one interface. You cannot have more than one interface. So if you have multiple interface, what you will be doing? Copy paste, and what you would say, implement one more interface and give one more binding there. Is it? Okay? And you give the different service name for that. Then you give the different binding to that one. Okay? Logically, it is, by the definition, it is a single abstract visual file. But when it goes to the deployment, it will be multiple XSD files, multiple visual files, right? Because the service itself is changes. Okay? Alright? But yes, physically if you see for service, the service interface visual file, we can have only one interface, but you can have a callback interface. But there is only one attribute that you can have, that is the interface. That means each service implements only one interface. If you want to implement one more interface, you have to write one more service. So what does that mean? Design time it is one visual, runtime it is two visuals, two concrete visuals, right? And if you don't want to do that, you have to do RPC style. Okay. So these are all the design challenges. Yes, it was a good question actually. I mean, good observation. How many interfaces that you can have? It might be one more interface. For now, don't worry about it now. Okay. So it is asynchronous, callback process. Don't worry about it now. Correlation kind of stuff. Okay.
In Beeple component, we create one service, and in while it is showing two services. One is external and one is internal.
Right. So in Beeple, it is just the one service. It is a partner link.
Okay.
I will show when we get into the partner link. I will tell you. Okay. And basically, as we discussed, inside the component, we maintain the services which are specific to the component. See, this service has no binding. That means it is not exposed outside, right? And the service here, it is exposed outside. That is the reason you have the right. So the private components, I mean, within the internal stuff, yes, it is still a visual, but you don't need a binding. I mean, internally it can call itself. Okay. So you have various levels of abstraction layers. Even in the Beeple, again you have the partner. Okay, and you see the redundancy here. Service is defined at the composite level, component level, again in the Beeple level, and still it is the same thing. It is a redundant actually, but we have no other way of doing it. Okay. Sometimes I understand it, at least for the service. For the reference, I do not understand why they do it. Okay, but there are some technical things. I have to check how 11.114 was designed. Okay, at least I see that references doesn't make sense having three layers. Beeple has the partner link, and component type has a reference, and again composite has a reference. Again you have to do the wiring, right? So I do not understand why it was, but I have even posted saying that it's a redundant, we can architecture wise can we take care of it. I don't know whether it was reflected on 11.114 or not. I don't know. Definitely 12 is going to be very beautiful. 12 version planning is 12 is going to be a beautiful version. Right? Probably after 11.114, probably there might be one more release, 11.115, but after that 12 release.
Hotel we need 6 GB of RAM.
Probably. Probably. Alright?
Quick
So,
question on installation. First, initially, how do we install the SOA? Is that first thing?
there is an installation class we will learn on that. Okay? If you need any help, so many previous batch people, I think you have done the installation in the previous batch, right? You are not there? So then you can ask your friends. Okay? And for the new batch onwards, I wanted to try, the installation with the help of batch members so that, we can get into that. So we'll save that time.
And just bring, first initially we need to install the logic and then the...
That we cannot spare time now.
Oh.
Okay? The installation stuff we cannot spare time because it's a redundant thing. Okay? Yes, we have another class session for that. Installation is another class. We can discuss in that. If I do it now, it will be redundant. Okay? Alright. So can we do a small application now?
Yes.
Okay. So before that I will show you from the scratch the JDeveloper so that you will understand the developer also.
Yeah, don't mind. After understanding the installation only we can get into the application.
No, don't get in. What installation you want?
Oh, exactly. What is the
SOA installation or JDeveloper installation?
we are not sure. That's why.
No, don't. I mean, to be frank with you, you don't have to do anything with the installation. Right?
The thing is that even though the previous batch sitting with us, we are into this and we are not sure of the installation and how the process and all.
You don't need it. There is a separate class and installation will take and last class will be, it will be extended. Is that fine with you?
The thing is that if you are able to understand the installation, hands on the application will be much meaningful. That's why we
No. Installation that is nowhere related to the application development. Right? The installation two parts. There are two ways types of installation. One is installation of JDeveloper and one is installation of your server.
We are
Right?
actually talking about installation of JDeveloper.
Yes, then it is right. Yes, we understand. So installation of JDeveloper, I can help you. Okay, you need the installation of JDeveloper. It will not take more time. So we'll help you installation of JDeveloper. But the server installation, it is nothing to do with the application development. You don't need the application development. So for the installation of JDeveloper, you can take help of Shiva. Okay, Shiva will help you in installing the JDeveloper on your laptops. Okay, there you will understand what are the steps and how you can do and everything. Right? So because if I say you installation of SOA, I need laptop and it takes so much of time and it's of basically I didn't see a value out of it at this moment. Okay, yes, we have the installation class. We will do it at the end. So that means we will spend more time on the development. So you will understand what's the main concept of development and everything. And installation is actually an administrator's job. Okay, but still will teach you the installation. Right? And all the pre-batch we taught the installation process also. Okay, and you can take the help of, if you still want the installation of SOA right away, you can take the help of Shiva or you can take the help of the previous batch members and you will be able to install. Right? So if you can hold it till at the end, I can show you the SOA installation. But yes, for now I can show you the JDeveloper installation. Okay, immediately you can just take the help of Shiva and you can set the help of Shiva and you can install JDeveloper. Yes, you need JDeveloper, but you don't need to install SOA because we already have servers up and running. Believe me, if you install SOA and JDeveloper, you may not be able to move ahead, may not be able to work. It consumes a lot of memory, right? So that is the reason it is feasible to install JDeveloper on your laptops and connect to our servers. We have it here, right? Okay. So anybody do you have a laptop? If you want, I can show you the JDeveloper. It is very easy actually.
I have a laptop.
You have a laptop? Yeah, I can show you the laptop. So do you want to take a small break and we'll ask Shiva to do anybody have a pen drive or thing.
I think
Huh? So can someone take help of Shiva and copy required softwares to your local directory? Okay, JDeveloper and the extension.
Just copied from the system the morning. I'm not sure whether the version which is there.
Right, I mean there are a lot of version differences. So take help from Shiva.
Okay. Yeah.
So you'll be able to copy the right versions. Even I'm not sure what is the right version. Okay, because Shiva is organizing all the software. Okay, we'll take break of 15-20 minutes. Okay, before that I think make sure you have copied JDeveloper extension into your local directory. Then installation is like 5-10 minutes job. Okay, and we'll install 11.1.2. Okay.
Sir, it is safe.
F3 button.